Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jessica Zavala, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Ohio Program for Campus Safety and Mental Health to today's webinar, Get in the Game, Addressing High-Risk Gambling Among College Students. Before I introduce today's presenters and dive into our discussion, I do have a few brief announcements to share. First, CME and CEU credits are available for today's session. The activity code is 31 HOWS. That's 31 HOWS. This code will expire tomorrow. So it expires within 24 hours at 12 noon. So it expires Wednesday, March 11th at 12 noon. Please be on the lookout for information posted in the chat of how you can obtain those credits if needed. Next, please save the date for our next webinar, which will be April 28th. That webinar, Campus Community Partnerships for Supporting Students with Disabilities, Ohio College to Careers. This interactive webinar will also be facilitated in a roundtable format. We will explore how opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities and the Ohio College to Careers program can support transitional age college students and emerging adults whose mental health conditions impact their education and employment pathways. So mark your calendars. You don't want to miss that one. Next, through our latest and potentially most ambitious initiative yet, we have a really exciting goal of training a minimum of 1,000 members of Ohio's campus community in QPR, or Question, Persuade, and Refer, which is a suicide gatekeeper prevention training course that prepares trainees to ask the most important questions. We hope you are able to join us in achieving this goal. See the sign, start the conversation in your campus community, and save a life. We welcome you to join us for this suicide prevention training course. So the next one will be held virtually on March 19th and May 14th at noon. Space is limited. Click on the link. You should see some information in the chat for how you can possibly join us for that training. As always, you might find additional details regarding these upcoming events on our website and social media pages. Additionally, we're happy to announce we have implemented a webinar topic suggestion box on our webinars page. So you don't have to wait till the end of the year if you have an exciting topic that you would like to share with us. Closed caption is also available and may be enabled on the Zoom toolbar, for today's conversation. Finally, this webinar will be recorded and the video will be made available for viewing on our YouTube channel. And now to introduce our speakers for today. Cindy Clouner is the Managing Director of the Higher Education Center for Alcohol and Drug Misuse Prevention and Recovery, an academic center at The Ohio State University whose mission is to empower those working to address collegiate alcohol and drug misuse associated harms to implement evidence-informed strategies with a continuum of prevention through recovery. She has served in this role since 2017. Claire Spada is the Director of Workforce Development for Problem Gambling Network of Ohio. She has over 15 years of experience working in the prevention field in varying capacities and is Ohio Certified Prevention Consultant. Without further ado, I pass it over to our friends and our partners, Cindy Clouner and Claire Spada.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jessica, for the warm welcome and introduction. We're certainly thrilled to be with all of you today. I'm Cindy Clouner with the Higher Education Center. You'll meet Claire here in just a moment. We'll get started by sharing just a little bit about the organizations that we're coming from before we dive into our content today. With the Higher Education Center, we're an academic center at Ohio State, as Jessica mentioned, and our role is to provide tools, training, and technical assistance to folks like you across the country working to address substance misuse and risky gambling behaviors among college students. We do a lot of training and workforce development. We have a weekly e-newsletter that goes out, and so I'll drop the link in the chat here at some point during our presentation, but you can also grab it with that QR code if you're not connected with us and receiving that newsletter. It's a great way to stay up to date about the work that we're doing and resources that you can access. Claire?
Absolutely. So my name is Claire Spada. I am the Director of Workforce Development, as Jessica mentioned earlier, at Problem Gambling Network of Ohio. Wanted to just share a little bit about my organization. So PGNO is a 501c3 organization. We are also the affiliate to the National Council on Problem Gambling. So there are roughly 40 some states that actually have affiliates. So we are Ohio's affiliate. And something that's really important to recognize on our end is that our stance is that we are neutral on legalized gambling. So we actually do a lot of advocacy work, and we're working really hard to mitigate harms from what expanded gambling might look like, especially in the state of Ohio. We provide a pretty significant number of services, and in that we do serve a variety of different folks. So we actually do have some clinicians on staff that do provide treatment services for individuals that have experienced gambling-related harm. We also provide support for loved ones as well. We connect to people through the Ohio Problem Gambling Helpline. We also do a lot of work for those who are working in their local communities. We do a lot of professional trainings, and our goal really is to help build up the workforce and make sure that anyone who is experiencing gambling related harm is able to know where to go for resources and is able to prevent that from even happening in the first place. So I appreciate being here.
Thanks, Claire. It's been such a wonderful partnership with working with the Problem Gambling Network of Ohio and with Claire. And we're thrilled to be able to share a little bit about what's happening in this space when it comes to gambling and sports betting behaviors among college students. So today we're going to describe a little bit about the current landscape, focusing on some of the most common gambling activities and policy changes that have led to an increase in problematic gambling behaviors. We're going to look at some of the trends that we're seeing with college students and how gambling is intersecting with other health and well-being issues that we're concerned about: mental health, suicidality, and substance use specifically. And we're also going to hopefully provide you some strategies today that you can integrate, that you can use to integrate high-risk gambling work into the existing prevention and intervention efforts on your campus. So before we go much further, though, it's important that we have a shared understanding of what we're talking about when we say the word gambling. So for the purpose of this presentation, we're defining gambling as any activity where a person risks an item of value, oftentimes money, on the outcome of an event that is determined mostly by chance to get something valuable. And it used to be that when we thought about gambling, some of the things that we would think about most are Vegas, slot machines, poker games, the glitz and the glamour that goes along with that. And while that is still true, and certainly those activities that you may associate with Las Vegas are forms of gambling, the way students are gambling now has certainly changed, and it's become much more accessible. Students no longer have to go to a casino to engage in gambling activities. They don't have to get together with a group of peers to play a poker game. Now they can access it on their phones through sports betting and prediction markets, which are on the rise. And the level of accessibility that students have to them is part of why we're seeing an increase in concern among the way students are engaging with those activities. So what has changed? We've known for a very long time that college students are at a higher risk of experiencing gambling harms than the average population. But we've seen some dramatic shifts in policy over the last few years that have led to us being where we are right now. First, we want to acknowledge the Supreme Court case that has allowed states to legalize sports gambling. And that is where we saw more states coming online with sports betting, either by legalizing actual online sports betting or allowing more sports betting to happen in person at casinos where maybe it didn't happen before. But certainly the access to online sports books has led to this proliferation of sports betting activity, and we are seeing it kind of seep into all different areas within our culture. More recently, we're seeing a big increase in access and utilization of prediction markets. And we're going to talk a little bit more about prediction markets in a bit, but those are regulated differently than sports books, and sometimes then fall under the radar when it comes to how we are talking about gambling and sports betting and addressing those concerns. So certainly something that we want to be mindful of.
And I'm sorry, Cindy, if I can just
Yes,
interject for a
please
second.
do.
I just want to say that the overturning of there was a law called PASPA, which basically said no sports betting allowed. And when that overturned in 2018 is really when we started seeing technology-based gambling become very, very big. And I think it's also, our generationally, we've seen a lot more mobile usage, technology usage. And it's really, really important to recognize that once that overturned, it really opened up the opportunity for a lot of other technology-based gambling, gaming, trading, whatever you want to call it, to engage and take place. So I think it's really important to recognize that sports betting overturning became big. Ohio held out, so we did not overturn we did not legalize or let sports betting actually be live until January 1st, 2023. But other states were legalizing it across the country, so we sort of saw this wave of technology-based gambling sort of come through.
Thanks, Claire. And that is important because we're still seeing a growing number of different types of activities that kind of uh, toe the line of, are they gambling, are they not gambling, and maybe they aren't meet the legal definition of gambling, but meet a practical definition of gambling, and that is some of the challenges that we're facing when it comes to regulating activities and also how these activities are impacting student well-being. So students, there's all sorts of different forms of gambling. And one of the things that we've learned as a center, as we've dove more into this space, is that when we talk about gambling and we use that word gambling, it isn't always a term that students recognize. They don't always see the activities listed here on this slide as gambling. Just like we made the reference to Vegas and poker and slot machines, those are things that still a lot of students see as gambling. And if you ask, have you gambled in the last 30 days, they may say no. But if you ask, well, have you done any sports wagering or sports betting in the last 30 days, they may say yes. And so the language we use when we're talking about gambling and sports betting is really important, and helping ensure that students understand that all of these activities are considered gambling, things that they may think of already as gambling. Like the activities on the left are some that are a bit more commonly associated with gambling, things like lottery, bingo, horse betting, live or tournament poker games, slot machines. The things on the right may not be associated with gambling for a lot of folks, but still in practicalities are gambling. Video game loot boxes. So that's purchasing, making a purchase within a video game for a chance to win something that would benefit you within the game. Betting skins, which are the kind of costumes or the way an avatar or a person looks within a video game, is another form of gambling. Trading cryptocurrencies or high risk stocks, day trading, prediction markets, all of these things meet that definition that we shared earlier of taking a chance, putting money towards a chance of getting something in return that is valuable. And it also comes with risk. But students don't always see all of these things as gambling. And so when we're talking with students, ensuring that we are being more encompassing with our language, asking about specific activities rather than just focusing on the language of gambling can be really, really important. So let's talk a little bit about prediction markets. I'd love to see in the chat kind of where people are with prediction markets. If this is, if you're seeing students talk about them on campus or in the work that you're doing with them, if this is a new concept for you or not. When we talk about prediction markets, we're talking about exchanges where people are trading contracts on the outcome of a future event. And prediction markets, right now, the biggest player out there is Kalshi. Polymarket is another big player. But Robinhood, Fanatics, DraftKings, FanDuel, they also have prediction markets in at least some states. They don't have, that's not all of them have prediction markets that are available in all states or even in Ohio. But because prediction markets for many of them, such a huge volume of the work that the trades that they're doing are related to sports. We certainly have seen an increase in traditional sportsbook operators wanting to get in the game and get their piece of the pie, right? So 90% of Kalshi's volume is related to sports, which is wild because these prediction markets are not regulated the same way that sportsbook operators are. They're regulated by the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, which is a federal entity. Where sportsbook operators are regulated at a state by state level by folks like here in Ohio, the Ohio Casino Control Commission is who is regulating those sportsbook operators. And the regulations require them to put some level of guardrails in place. We see when they're advertising, you may see the small print at the bottom that encourages people to reach out to a helpline if they're concerned about their gambling activity. There are some guardrails in place where with these prediction markets, there are not. And so people purchase contracts and trade these contracts where the pricing is tied to the probability of the event happening. But one of the biggest concerns with prediction markets is how easy it is for insider trading to take place. So with prediction markets, people can trade on things as benign as the weather. So the highest temperature, what will the highest temperature in San Francisco be? And we can make a trade, purchase a contract on what temperature, how likely it is for it to reach this temperature, yes or no. That's what we're purchasing. Is it going to happen? Yes. Or is it not going to happen? No. But we also see things, people are betting on things that are more culturally relevant. So TV shows like Who Will Win Survivor Season 50. And there's big concerns with these types of trades because the idea with trading contracts is that we're trading on the outcome of future events, like we're trying to predict whether something will happen or not. But this has already happened. The public doesn't necessarily know because we haven't seen the season finale of Survivor, but they are long gone from the island. Everyone's back at home. There was a cast and a crew that certainly know the outcome of Survivor season 50. So while it may not be public knowledge, there are probably hundreds of people who know the outcome of this event. So is this really a future event anymore? So those types of things, or they'll trade on whether or not a person is going to say a word during a speech. So will Donald Trump say a certain word? Will Snoop Dogg say a certain word during the Olympics? That was one that was a trade. And when we have these contracts where one individual person has such a significant role in whether or not something is going to happen, it raises a lot of red flags for insider trading. We also are trading on things that really are like, as a society, we should maybe be thinking about whether it's appropriate for us to monetize the idea of like how many measles cases will there be? Will we be invading certain countries? Like these are all things that people are trading on that really can be concerning from kind of a values and moral perspective as a society, that we are looking at these issues from a way to generate money.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share. I did throw some documents in the chat as Cindy was talking. So one of them is a very good recent PBS NewsHour where they sort of talk about prediction markets, and we have started to see some repercussions for insider trading. So one of the first ones that has been documented is an employee who worked for Mr. Beast, who's a YouTuber, who again sort of knew what Mr. Beast was going to say or do before he placed a pretty large wager on that in Kalshi, and sort of got found out that, oh hey, you knew that was going to be posted on social media. So yeah, we definitely are starting to see those cases pop up.
Thanks, Claire. One of the other big concerns about this is the advertising is much more pervasive than some of the things that we're seeing with sports betting. They're targeting populations that have not historically been targeted. Sports betting has always focused more on men. We're seeing more women targeted with this. The idea that we don't have to be doing anything or have any kind of expertise, but it's a great way to make our coffee money. So those are the types of ads that we're seeing, and it's being embedded in lots of different places through formal agreements with CNN, and I believe CNBC has a formal agreement with Kalshi as well. So they're kind of monetizing our news that we're watching too.
Yeah, I will say you'll probably start to see a lot of these come up on your phone because I'm sure your phone is listening. And I don't know if anybody else gets targeted advertisements for things, but you might start to see some Kalshi ads pop up if you listen to them long enough because they don't sound like they're a Kalshi ad from the get-go. That's the always tricky part.
They do not. Kalshi's been really active at using influencers, and so it doesn't look like an ad. And that is, I think, one of the trickiest and most deceptive parts. And so, ensuring that our students are able to understand media and have awareness of media can be a helpful tool as well. When we're looking at policies, one of the other things we wanted to mention is prop betting. And so prop betting is related to sports betting, and it's the idea of we put a wager on an individual player or a specific aspect of an event that is not directly related to the event outcome. So it doesn't matter whether a team wins or loses. It matters whether a certain athlete scores a number of points. And Ohio was one of the first states to come out and make it illegal for people to place prop bets on college athletes, which is fantastic. They've really led the way, in large part because of the incredible advocacy of PGNO to help support student athlete well-being. One thing that it's important to note is those laws only protect folks when they are in Ohio, because if that doesn't stop anyone from other states placing bets on our Ohio athletes, nor does it stop people when Ohio athletes are traveling to away games placing bets on them. And so those protections only go so far when they're in a state by state case, as they are right now with sports betting.
And you
And
can
those
still place bets on college games. So
that's
there
right.
still could be, right, those impacts of somebody reaching out and saying, you screwed up, why didn't you, whatever, right? If you're thinking about the mental health of a student who might be targeted by some harassment by someone who's placing a bet on them.
Absolutely. And we've seen a lot of that harassment among student athletes. It's been a concern. At one time, there was a study from the NCAA that found that women basketball student athletes received 3 times more threats than their male counterparts. And the University of Dayton's coach, Anthony Grant, the head basketball coach there, was one of the first to really bring awareness to this issue a few years ago about the threats and harassment. And these prop bets then take that and direct it to an individual, right? Because those prop bets are based on one person being able to accomplish something. We've seen certainly a lot of news too about how again, people fixing games and getting in trouble for game fixing related to this too. The NCAA has called for a ban on prop bets within college sports. As early as or as recent as their convention in January, they reiterated this call, and they have a campaign, the Draw the Line campaign, that has some resources that campuses can use. Claire, I'll pass this one over to you.
Sure. I think it's also very relevant to know and recognize that this is the Ohio Administrative Code that the Ohio Casino Control Commission does enforce. And that is something that, again, I think is incredible that this was a decision from the get-go. So when they were writing the rules and laws for sports betting in Ohio, this was written into it. So sports betting companies are not allowed to actually advertise on campus. That doesn't mean that you couldn't watch TV at the gym and an advertisement's not, is going to pop up on TV. You can't prevent that, but they are not allowed to directly promote on college campuses. There was actually a situation very early on when Barstool Gaming had actually showed up at BGSU's um, football game, and they honestly, what happened was they showed up, Casino Control Commission fined them and said, you can't do that. And they were trying to fight back and saying, well, we are filming a show that's geared towards those who are over 21. And the Casino Control Commission was like, nope, that's not how it works. And so Casino Control really has enforced it and made it really, really important. So I will say, if you do have any concerns on campus, I know that we've had high schools reach out because there were cars that were wrapped with DraftKings or whoever on the side of it that were parked out in front of the building and things like that. So if you are concerned about any advertising on your local campus or within your geographical area of your college campus, Casino Control Commission does take it seriously and they will make movement. So please reach out at any point in time if you see something that you're concerned with.
Thanks, Claire. So then when we look at campus-specific policies, we don't have really great data on what policies look like. I'd love to know more about the policies that you have on your campus as it relates to gambling or sports betting. And when we did some initial looking at what policies are out there, we saw a few common themes. One of them is around not betting on any school-related events. We saw prohibitions on staff and faculty from gambling while on duty. The most common being prohibition or limitations on gambling activities that are held by student organizations or within public spaces. So you're not supposed to have a poker game in the student union or holding casino nights that generate revenue as part of a fundraiser for a student organization. If you're not familiar what your gambling or sports betting related policies are, I encourage you to take a look at them. Certainly if you're at an institution that is active in NCAA athletics, there's policies there on that end. However, also looking at what your general university policies are on gambling and being familiar with those is an important step. All right, so I'm going to pass things over to, nope, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. So we're going to start with some data about college students. And as I shared before, college students have always been a high risk population for experiencing gambling related harms, 3 times greater risk actually than the general population. And we've, as universally as institutions, have been really, really slow to address this issue. And a big part of that is because prior to the increase in access and the use of digital gambling tools to be able to engage in gambling activities, it was a lot harder for us to see. And even now, if a student could be betting in class and we wouldn't necessarily know. It's easier for us to pick up on harms related to alcohol. We might smell it, we might notice impairment, but with gambling, it is a lot harder to see those harms. They don't impact other people the way that alcohol-related harms impact other people. And so it has largely gone under the radar for college campuses. It is estimated that about 3/4 of all college students have engaged in at least one gambling activity within the last year. And again, the center holds the same gambling neutral stance as PGNO does. Lots of people engage in gambling activities without experiencing any kind of harm. And so our take is not that students shouldn't be gambling. It is that students should understand how to engage in gambling activities if they choose to engage in gambling activities in a way that's going to reduce their risk of experiencing harm. And so understanding what some of those risk factors are is really helpful when it comes to gambling and college students. Being male, living in a group household, involvement in fraternity and sorority organizations are some of the biggest risk factors. Student athletes are at high risk, and not just our NCAA athletes, club and intramural athletes are also at high risk. And you could argue that they're at higher risk because, again, they don't have the same protections and support that NCAA athletes have. So just a student perceiving themselves as an athlete puts them at a higher risk of experiencing gambling harms. Students who perceive themselves as less academically successful are also more likely to engage in high-risk gambling behaviors. And so the NCAA did a study in 2023 that looking at sports betting specifically and the frequency of engaging in sports betting among 18 to 20 or 22-year-olds. And we saw that a little over a third were engaging in sports betting a few times a year, but 10% a few times a week, probably about 4% daily, and just under 15% a few times a month. And this was, again, 2023. And one of the other challenging things now is our language. When we ask these questions about sports betting, oftentimes we're focused so much on betting through things like DraftKings, FanDuel, and we're not capturing how many people are trading and engaging in prediction market activity related to sports, which essentially is the same thing. And so that language of how we talk to students is really important, and how we ask questions when we're trying to do surveillance data collection is also really important, because a lot of those of us that have been asking questions, we may or may not have accurate data depending on the language that we've been using within those questions.
And I'll just point out here, in Ohio, you have to be 21 years old or older to make an account with sports betting apps in Ohio that are legally run here. So, you might be saying, well, then how are all these students engaging in sports betting? And I absolutely know that students, might utilize somebody who is of age, who can have an account and give them money to bet on their behalf. We do see a lot of illegal apps being run and kinds of things on the internet, that may not be Ohio sanctified or certified or overseen or regulated. There is a lot of like personal betting that goes back and forth on things. And I think the prediction market, you only have to be 18 to engage in it. And because the vast majority of that sports betting, is being done through all of that. I mean, really, we can see a lot of people are engaging in a lot of different ways, not necessarily just through legal apps like DraftKings or FanDuel.
Absolutely. Claire, why don't you share a little Ohio data?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ohio is really fortunate. So we actually collect prevalence data from adults every 5 years. We collected it first in 2012 when casinos and racinos came to Ohio. We did it 5 years later in 2017. This is the most recent in 2022. And I will tell you that the Ohio Control Commission actually has some sports betting specific data that they've not yet analyzed, that hopefully in the next year they'll be able to share out. But then there will be another survey that goes out about all kinds of gambling activities in 2027. So we pulled the 18 to 24-year-old data, and I will tell you, when we look at the age groups for anyone who's at risk, period, in the state of Ohio, 18 to 24 in all three data surveys in the past 15 years, they have been the highest population that's engaged in problematic activities when it comes to gambling. So this is the 18 to 24 survey data in particular. And this is just what kind of gambling activities were you engaging in? Again, this is 2022. So in 2022, you can see the categories are lottery products, casino products, sports betting, gaming, which refers to video gaming, gambling, loot boxes and things like that that Cindy talked about earlier, online gambling on websites, financial, so day trading, cryptocurrency, things like that. And then this other category, which is sort of what else might you have? Bingo, raffles, personal bets, dares, things like that. And you can see that the vast majority of young people engaged sort of in this other category, followed secondly by gambling within video games. The third that almost is very, very close to being tied is lottery, then financial. And even in 2022, before sports betting was even launched, we still saw at least a third of young people who took this survey were already engaging in sports betting even prior to that. So I think those kinds of things are really important to recognize. I think it'll be really fascinating to kind of look at what the next data shows, since sports betting has become legal, and even technology-based gambling has really sprung up in a lot of ways that I don't think anybody was anticipating. So it'll be interesting to see what the next one shows. When we then look at this data that breaks it down a little bit further, where we sort of look at those who are engaging in each of these activities, How are they categorized by the level of risk that's associated with with each of those? You can see that online gambling for 18 to 24-year-olds, even though not as many were engaging as, those who did engage with it actually had more problems than a lot of the other categories on the list. By far, 13.6% of those who were doing online gambling were already experiencing problems related to that. The second to that was casino gambling, which is really interesting. Third down is sports, then video gaming, then lottery, then financial, then other. So even though more young people are engaging in sort of this other category, it typically is less problematic. And I'm going to guess it's probably based on the frequency of their engaging in those activities. We know that when it comes to technology-based gambling, there's a lot of different types of risk that's associated with it. I can do it 24/7. I can do it, as Cindy said, in class. I can do it in bed at 2 a.m. There's a lot more of that hidden component. We do call it that hidden addiction. I can hide my bank account. I can hide that sort of information. I don't have to, nobody's going to look at me and know that I'm engaging in that. I can hide it from my parents, from my family, from my friends, whoever it happens to be. And so I think when we look at specifically that online component, that's why we do tend to see more problems related to it, because I also can engage in it for a very significant period of time. I can kind of get that instant gratification over and over and over again, versus if I'm, for example, buying lottery tickets. I have to go wait in line at a gas station. There might be somebody in front of me, then I have to physically scratch it. We are seeing an increase in online lottery tickets being purchased. I just got 2 advertisements yesterday for lotto.com when I was watching YouTube. So, we're seeing a lot of really interesting technology-based gambling sort of driving, again, some of these problematic issues because of how people are experiencing it.
And so there are lots of reasons for folks on campus to be concerned beyond just the gambling activity. We know that there's a lot of intersections between those students who are engaging in high-risk gambling behaviors are also engaging in high-risk alcohol use. Those two share a lot of the same risk factors. You see them below if they're male, fraternity, sorority life, and living away from home, having high levels of impulsivity and sensation seeking, right? That's a risk level or a risk factor for those that are engaging in high risk alcohol use. Also for those with gambling, engaging in high risk gambling behaviors, experiencing psychological distress. And so we see, and oftentimes, especially with the sports betting culture, it has been infused in these places where alcohol is a common part of the experience, right? And that was always the case in casinos too. You may have gotten free drinks while you were betting, but when folks are watching a game and betting on the game while they're watching and they're consuming alcohol with friends, it's become a part of a social experience for a lot of folks. And that can certainly be a concern. But perhaps one of the biggest concerns is the co-occurrence of gambling disorder and other mental health disorders. So it's estimated that 96% of people who are experiencing gambling harm have at least one mental health disorder. And so if it really, I think, drives home for us that if we are focused on mental health for students and student well-being, gambling has to be a part of that. We have to be thinking about how gambling might be impacting student well-being. 31.6% of students or of gamblers who are experiencing harm from their gambling reported having a lifetime history of a suicidal ideation, 13% with a lifetime history of suicide attempts. It is the group of folks who are at the highest risk of suicidality. And so we should be thinking about this, asking questions when we're working with students clinically around other mental health issues, asking them, how are your finances? What kinds of activities are you doing for fun? Asking about some of those gambling activities to get a better sense of whether or not gambling might be a part of the concerns that may be contributing to the harm that they're experiencing. So Claire, we'll have you dive in a little bit more into what we can do now that we know all of this.
Absolutely. So, in terms of supporting young people, I think one key critical moment is sort of recognizing what kind of things might I be looking for. As Cindy said, it can be really hard with gambling in particular because it might not come up in natural conversation. There could be shame or embarrassment. They could say, "Oh, this is really not the issue. I won a whole bunch yesterday, so today it's not an issue for me," right? So there could be a whole variety of different things that might cause it to kind of go under the radar. And so here are some things that as we read through this list, you might go, well, this sounds like a lot of other things. And it does, which is why we need to ask a lot of other questions. So, firstly, are we seeing a lot of absences from work or school? Are we seeing an impact in like kind of grades going up, going down, kind of very, very suddenly? Are they isolating themselves? Are they kind of withdrawing from the people around them? Are they, we often times talk about, right, am I like exaggerating my wins? Am I understating my losses? Am I making it sound like I'm winning all the time? I will tell you that generally speaking, most people who talk about lots and lots and lots of wins oftentimes are maybe fabricating that information a little bit. Statistically speaking, if we just look at odds and probability, it is not likely for someone to continue to win and win and win and win and win and win. That is generally not very common. So a lot of times they might be hiding those losses, not talking about them, writing them off, saying that's not important. I'm minimizing that. If they are lying about engaging or doing those gambling behaviors, as well as why are they engaging with it? So a lot of times we do see people who are using gambling as a way to kind of, mask uncomfortable feelings, emotions, traumatic situations, things that I'm experiencing that might be negative in my life that I'm using gambling to make myself feel good or kind of zone out. And I think especially if you do, hear about people, especially students talking about maybe unexplained debt, right? Like if they're like, I can't pay for my books. Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about where your money went, right? We do unfortunately know that there are students sometimes who will take their grant monies and they'll use it for gambling because they think, well, if I can make some extra money on that, then I can get my books and get all these other extra things that I need. So those kinds of things might be things that you can question a little bit or ask some more questions about, why don't you have money to buy lunch today? Like, tell me more about that, right? So those kinds of things, again, just one little sliver in kind of the bigger picture and the bigger component. But those could very easily be some warning signs to ask more questions about. I think a really important thing to do is education. So when we talk about good prevention science says that education is one of the most important things that we can do to prevent something from becoming a problem. And so there are a variety of different things that I think are important to talk about. So first and foremost, what is gambling? I think is a really critical conversation. We just had it with you all. You might go, I didn't realize that such and such was actually gambling. And I will guarantee I've done problem gambling 101 conversations with adults in my community for years and years and years, and every single one of them goes, I never realized that was gambling before. And so I will guarantee that, again, your students may have different perceptions around what gambling actually is or isn't. So I think it's important to talk about that, recognize what does that risk look like? How could it potentially impact somebody negatively? I do think the psychology behind gambling is incredibly, incredibly important to talk about, as well as even, media literacy and talk about advertisements and talk about, how are they marketing? Like, let's take a look at an ad. Like, tell me more about this. What kind of tactics are they using? And then I really think for those who are going to engage in gambling behaviors and activities, it's important to say, okay, how can we keep it safe? How can we keep it healthy? How can we make sure that it doesn't become problematic? All of our data and research here in Ohio still shows that most people who gamble don't have problems. However, if somebody is engaging in it, there are things that they can do that can keep them safe, like setting limits, like making sure that they're keeping accountable, like, only giving themselves so much money every month or so, on top of just making sure that they're not spending money that they can't afford to lose, for example. And then if they are recognizing that it's becoming a problem, where could they go and reach out to for some help or get some additional support? Pause Before You Play is a great resource. It is a statewide resource. that is geared towards adults in Ohio that are engaging in gambling activities. And it's a really great toolkit. There's a whole bunch of different information on there that is really geared towards teaching people how to gamble in safe ways, recognizing what are the warning signs. And as Cindy posted, is going to be posting in the chat here, we have a great toolkit that is geared towards college students. So if you're thinking about how can I maybe promote some tips on campus or keep things safe or bring awareness to it, I would absolutely recommend using the college toolkit to do some promotion on campus and encourage them to make sure that if they are gambling, that they're doing it in a safe way. As sort of mentioned, here might be some tips or tricks that you can kind of encourage young folks to use if they are going to engage in gambling behavior. So making sure that they are setting budgets for themselves. You know, if I'm using money, it should only be fun money that I'm spending on gambling activities. Only betting with your own money, so we shouldn't be robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of situation. Make sure that we are setting time limits for ourselves. I think especially in our technology-based world, I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm old still, right? I'm like, I've been on Facebook way too long today. So there are ways that we can set kind of those time limits for ourselves for how long am I going to engage in this activity. As we mentioned before a couple of times, being informed on those advertisements, especially with prediction markets, especially with sports betting. I think that we saw a huge shift in advertisements on gambling in Ohio a couple of years ago, and it's really become very inundated in a lot of our society. And a lot of them use really tricky tactics to make it seem like it's going to solve all our problems and make our lives better. And we're going to be, we're going to make so much money and we're going to pay for our coffee each day. And we're going to, it's so easy to do. We're going to give you promotional bets, all of those kinds of things, I think can help. If we are informed of them, we can make sure that we're mentally protecting ourselves as we're coming into it. The other two components, making sure that, we are not betting when we are stressed, upset, trying to escape a problem, or when we're using alcohol or other drugs, because if we are impaired while we're engaging in that, a lot of times we may engage in other unhealthy behaviors, or we might spend more than we had planned on because we're not, we are impaired. We're not within that right mind. And that can absolutely lead to some potential issues. When it comes to student athletes in particular, as we mentioned before, sports betting in particular has a unique impact on college students that are athletes. And unfortunately, if you're looking at a lot of this data here, we do see a lot of harassment towards young college athletes. And while Ohio has done several things to try to protect students, unfortunately, there are bad actors and people that will reach out and say terrible things to young students, unfortunately. And so we do see a lot of things on social media, as you can see. We see a lot of people DMing students and saying really mean things to them, unfortunately. And I think because of this increase in sports betting since 2018, we've seen this hugely, hugely impact our student athletes, whether they want to be exposed to it or not. They are sort of part of this equation of what might be engaged with. And so when we think about how we can maybe support those student athletes in particular, if you don't mind clicking to the next slide for me, Cindy, there is another campaign. This one was actually put forward by Casino Control Commission. And this one is More Than a Bet. So this campaign is, again, a very unique one in that it actually is intended to target people who are betting on sports, college sports in particular, and who are maybe feeling upset towards a college student. And the idea behind the campaign, as you can see in the very first image there, is this, it's coming from the perspective that I'm a student athlete, I'm a friend, I'm a human, I am more than a bet. So it's very much of a like, hey, you have to realize there's a real person behind me being an athlete. Like I have a heart. I have, people who care about me. Like I'm doing this because I love it. Whatever it happens to be, we want them to sort of take that emotional component out of it. Like that you can't just be mad at somebody, who maybe didn't make a free throw that they should have made or whatever it happened to be. So there, in this toolkit, for More Than a Bet, they have provided a bunch of different social media campaigns. There's flyers, there are handouts, things like that. So I will say that, again, this is something that is no cost to you. So if there are resources here that you think would be helpful for promoting, in your local community or even on a broader perspective, that is absolutely something that you are more than welcome to use and kind of take and just kind of use on your behalf. One other way that you could support students is by looking at including problem gambling screenings in any of your intake paperwork. For anybody that works in a counseling department, there are a bunch of different screens that are effective. I personally really enjoy this Rutgers gambling screen. It is a combination of several different types of gambling screens. What I will say that I really like about this screen in particular is that the first thing it does is it says, what kind of activities have you engaged in the past 12 months? And it'll actually say horse betting, sports betting, prediction market. So it actually has everything sort of laid out for just saying, what kind of gambling activities have you engaged in? And then it engages with, has this become problematic? So it sort of, again, does the education piece for you of the what is gambling component. And it really walks you through, what other questions should I ask? How should I ask it? And then it sort of broadens it again to, what kind of things should you ask where. It's a really, really great tool. And I will say it's something that's pretty easy to implement if you already have paperwork where you're already integrating mental health screenings, substance use screenings. This is another component that you can easily throw in there as well. So you might be saying to yourself, well, hey, a screening is great, but what if I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to actually treating gambling on campus? There is an opportunity to refer out whenever you need to. I will say that in Ohio, we do have a variety of different counselors that are able to treat throughout the state of Ohio. Depending on where you're located, you may or may not have a local option that's close to you. I will say Gambling Help Ohio is a resource. They are a lot of local agencies. Some of that, which might be a little bit of a toss up, is if your young person wants to travel off campus and actually go to a local agency for treatment. That is absolutely an option. The other option is that we also run the Ohio Gambling Telehealth Network. So that is PG&O runs the Ohio Gambling Telehealth Network. This is available at no cost to Ohioans, and it is completely telehealth. So it is all over Zoom. All that young person needs is an email address. They do have to upload a photo ID, and I will tell you that even though you might have a student that lives somewhere else and is maybe just living in Ohio while they're here at college, that is absolutely okay. If they have a student ID, that can be used to kind of show that they have residency in the state of Ohio. They can do sessions through their phone, through a computer. So if you have like a local library, right, where they have a room that they can go to and get telehealth services, they're in a quiet space so their roommate isn't overhearing them, right? There are all kinds of things that you might think about on campus, whereas, could I also push this resource out in those communities, in those areas? If I don't feel confident about treating that on site, you can refer those to our counselors as well, and there is no cost at all to that. If you are interested in treating and you're like, wow, we would really love to do this in-house, I will say that we also have you covered. So if you have staff that are licensed through the Counselor, Social Worker, Marriage and Family Therapist Board, one thing that they can do is add it to their scope of practice. If they are licensed through the Chemical Dependency Board, they actually have a gambling endorsement that you can apply for. It's basically a combination of 30 hours of education, as well as some supervised experience. The nice thing is, as well, is that we also have no cost supervision. So if somebody goes through the trainings and they're like, cool, I got my education, but I don't have somebody local to me that can supervise me, we also have a no cost supervision program that's all virtual. As Cindy mentioned earlier, our Stages training series is the one that does cover all of that, and we will promote that. And I know that Cindy's already thrown that in the chat for everybody as well. We do have a series that is coming up here in April, and we run that quarterly. Cindy, do you want to run through maybe what are some of these other additional resources that are provided?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know we just have a couple of minutes left, and we'll drop links to all of these in the chat, but there are other resources that you can access. Collegegambling.org is a website of the International Consortium for Responsible Gaming that has some resources. Know Your Play has a suite of videos and digital assets that you can use. ResponsiblePlay.org is a website of the National Council on Problem Gambling, and they have a toolkit with social media assets that focus on those risk reduction strategies that you can use to promote. We've already shared some of the NCAA resources, but they also have a free e-learning module that's available to anyone through their website. And like I said, we'll drop a link to those resources in the chat here in a moment. Certainly, Claire has covered a lot of resources around treatment, but we also wanted to identify some resources for recovery. If you have a collegiate recovery program on campus, having conversations about how could you support students with a gambling disorder? How can they engage with the existing recovery supports on campus would be helpful. Certainly looking at what peer support groups might exist within your community, whether that be Gamblers Anonymous or other AOD recovery groups that are inclusive of gambling, like Smart Recovery. There's also some resources for online peer support networks like GamTalk, and self-exclusion programs are also available through the state. And so that's something that you can look into as well as a resource for students who may have a gambling disorder. We did want to share about some of the upcoming trainings that are happening. If you want to keep learning more, we have our free webinar for March is March 19th. It'll feature Jenna Hotelling from the National Council on Problem Gambling. She's going to set a nice foundation around gambling risks with college students is a lead up to our Spring Learning Collaborative taking place April 16th. That is a full day virtual event that is free for Ohio campuses through support from the Ohio Department of Behavioral Health. Claire mentioned the stages training, and the first part of that series is taking place April 1st through the 3rd. And we'll also be hosting a water cooler chat, which is an opportunity to engage in conversation around prediction markets. So we'll be sharing a little bit more about what they are, hearing about what you're talking about what you're seeing on campus with students as well. And so we hope that you can join us for one or all of those upcoming events. With that, we'll leave you with our contact information and any questions that you might have. Feel free to drop them in the Q&A box or the chat. I know we're kind of at the end of our time, but happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Again, I know we are right on the cusp of time, and while folks are placing any questions or comments or any really feedback within the chat or Q&A function, I just want to personally thank you, Cindy, as well as Claire, for a very informative and awesome presentation today. And just also a quick reminder for folks that we will be disseminating the slides. And again, this presentation was recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel as well. So we'll give just another minute before we wrap up. But again, thank you so much for a very, very informative presentation. Lots of good information, lots of great resources for our campus community partners. Well, we're right at 12:59, and certainly to be respectful for time, one last time, if you are interested in claiming CEUs for today, the activity code is 31 House. That's 31 HOWS. That will expire tomorrow at 12 noon. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Please join me in also thanking our very, very special guests, Cindy and Claire, for a very awesome presentation today. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you again.